Greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to the living room. My name is Ethel James, though many people simply know me as Dr. J. And to those of you who have been joining me throughout this first month of Legacy Rising Conversations, please allow me to say thank you for continuing the journey. And to those who are entering through the front door for the very first time, let me say I am genuinely glad that you are here, and I invite you to come in, sit down, and let's talk. Over the past several weeks, we have established the heart of this house. We began with a simple but important truth: you belong here. And then I shared why I built the house. The moment I realized I could no longer carry my God given purpose through disconnected systems, competing expectations, divided expressions of myself. And we examined faith and leadership and the space between, confronting the false idea that spiritual grounding and professional excellence must exist on opposite sides of our lives. And in our last conversation, I was bold enough to ask, what if you are not too much? What if your fullness does not require erasure, but healing and discipline and discernment and alignment and responsible stewardship? And so today we arrive at the question that naturally follows all of that, and that is, where do I begin? Because belonging in the house does not automatically tell you which room requires your attention first. And you may recognize yourself in several conversations. You may be carrying needs that touch multiple areas of your life. And you may be leading, you may be rebuilding, you may be healing and creating or serving and discerning and most of all, becoming. All at the same time. And when everything feels important, it becomes difficult to determine what is first. And that's where many people become stuck, not because they lack desire, not because they lack intelligence, not because they are all unwilling to move. They are standing in the living room surrounded by legitimate possibilities, but they do not know which doorway is connected to their present assignment. And as a result, they either attempt to enter every room simultaneously, or they remain seated indefinitely because choosing one beginning feels like abandoning everything else. And today, I want to help release you from both extremes. You do not have to enter every room at once, and choosing one room first does not mean that the other rooms cease to exist. It just means that you have discerned where the most important work must begin. The living room is not where you are expected to solve your entire life. It is where you actually take the time to slow down long enough to recognize what your life is actually asking of you. Because many people make decisions while still moving at the speed of crises. Yes, I said at the speed of crises. They make permanent commitments from temporary emotions, and they choose opportunities because they are available, not because they are aligned. They enter rooms because those rooms are crowded, visible, profitable, popular, or even familiar, and they respond to pressure before examining purpose. And then months or even sometimes years later, they wonder why they are active but not advancing. Busy does not, they're busy but not becoming visible, right? Or not becoming visible but not fulfilled, and productive but not fruitful. And so the living room gives you permission to pause before proceeding, and not to cause you to procrastinate, but to orient, right? Because orientation asks, where am I? And what am I carrying? What season am I in? And what has God been emphasizing? What is consuming my emotional energy? What responsibility can no longer be ignored? What opportunity is truly aligned? And what pattern keeps repeating because I have not addressed its source? What does this season require from me? Not from the person I was, not from the person others expect me to be, but from the person I am becoming now. And those questions help you locate yourself before you select the doorway. Because you cannot wisely determine where to go next if you are unwilling to acknowledge where you currently stand. Your first room is not always your favorite room. One of the mistakes we make is assuming that the right room will always be the room we most enjoy. And it may not be, right? Because you may love vision, but your first room may be structure. You may love serving other people, but your first room may be that you need to be healed. And you may love learning, but your first room may be application. You may love leadership, but your first room may be accountability. You may love faith, faith conversations, but your first room, it may be emotional honesty. And you may even love launching, but your first room may be finishing because we like to launch, but nobody likes to finish. And so you might get the excitement of that, but we want you to find your room where you can finish. You may love possibilities, but your first room may be priorities. And see, the room you prefer and the room you need are not always the same because preference asks a very specific questions. It asks, what feels most comfortable. But discernment will ask you a different question. It will ask you what will make the rest of the house healthier. Now that is a very different type of scenario that we have formulated here, but a homeowner may prefer decorating the living room, but if the foundation is shifting, then decoration is not the priority. And so what we're getting at is that there are some priorities that we have to begin to give ear to because someone may want to expand the house, but if the electrical system cannot carry the load, I want you to pause right there and hear what I'm saying. If the electrical system cannot carry the load, then expansion becomes dangerous. And someone may be eager to welcome more guests to their home. But if there are no boundaries around access, then hospitality becomes depletion. And so, what I'm saying to you is that the right room is often the room that strengthens your capacity to steward everything else. It may not produce the quickest applause, of course, but it may not, and it also may not be publicly impressive. It may require private work before visible movement. And it's something that Tony Robbins always said, people are rewarded in something to the effect about, what people practice in private for years yields those results. The benefit or the gain comes in public later. I cannot recall the exact quote, but I can still hear his mouth. I can still hear his voice saying that, right? But private order often determines public endurance. That's basically what he is saying. So I'm going to tell you, listen to the language of your life because your life is always communicating. Your exhaustion is always communicating. Your reoccurring conflict is communicating. Your resentment is communicating. Your excitement is communicating. Even your avoidance has a voice and it's communicating. Your unanswered questions are communicating, right? Your repeated mistakes are communicating. Your disproportionate reactions are communicating, and your deepest longing, that's almost the loudest voice. It's communicating. So not every feeling is an instruction, but every recurring signal deserves examination. And so you say, well, Dr. J, what do you mean by that? And I would say, whoa, okay, let's give some infrastructure around what I'm talking about. And what I mean is that if you repeatedly feel invisible, perhaps the issue is not simply recognition. Maybe you need to examine identity. You may need to examine voice or confidence or boundaries or even the environments in which you are seeking affirmation. Let that sit down for just a moment because if every opportunity leaves you overwhelmed, then perhaps the issue is not the opportunity. You may need governance, systems, priorities, or even permission to say no. Think about what I'm saying because if you constantly encounter communication breakdowns, perhaps the issue is not that people refuse to understand you. You may need to examine your expectations that you have of people to understand you. You may need to examine assumptions and delivery and your ability to actively listen, or even you may have to consider you might have some unresolved tension. If you keep beginning projects without completing them, perhaps the issue is not laziness. You may need to examine fear of evaluation, fear of perfectionism, right? You might be that person. I used to be her, right? Or unclear sequencing, lack of support, or even the exhilaration of starting compared with the vulnerability of finishing. And if you are spiritually active but internally depleted, perhaps the issue is not a lack of faith. You may need rest. You may need some truth and some community or emotional care, or the courage to admit that strength has become a performance. And the signal is not always the room. Sometimes it is simply the sound coming from behind the door. And you have a level of responsibility in this, right? And your responsibility is to listen closely enough to determine what is actually asking for your attention. Pain. Ooh, I used to be well acquainted with pain. And see, what we know about pain is that pain gets our attention, but pain does not always identify the true source of the problem. And I know this because a person may feel frustrated at work and assume they need a new job. You see where I'm getting, right? The deeper need may be a conversation they have avoided, and a person may feel lonely and assume they need a relationship. And think hard and long about that, right? But the deeper need may be the ability to be present with themselves without constant distraction. A leader may feel disrespected and assume that the team lacks commitment, but the deeper issue may be unclear expectations. And I know we can talk about expectations for a long time here, but it may also be inconsistent accountability. A gifted person may feel stuck and assume they need a larger platform, but the deeper need may be discipline. It may need be a positioning or preparation or even a clearer message. And someone may feel spiritually distant and assume they need another conference, they need another service, their season is over, they need to go to another church, or they might even say, I need a different experience. But in actuality, the deeper need may be obedience to something God already revealed. And see, what I know is this, and that is that pain tells you something matters, and discernment helps you determine what. So before entering a room, because it promises relief, you want to ask yourself a very important question. And that question is this room addressing the symptom, or is it addressing the source? And I really honestly I warn people about that, because oftentimes when I see in ministries, in organizations, is that people know how to address symptoms, but we have to learn how to acclimate, right, to another level, or not even necessarily acclimate, but kind of ascend to another level. We need to elevate to another level so that we can begin to understand that while we are able to identify what the symptoms are, we have to learn how to identify what the root cause is. Because when we can get to the root cause of pain or whatever the situation may be in that moment, we're able to root it up so that it doesn't become pain later, and it'll yield the relief that we can expect. Because relief can be immediate, but transformation requires truth. And the truth of the matter is, the symptom, it might give you an idea of where the pain is, but you have to dig deeper to get to the root. What's that saying? Opportunity only knocks once. But I heard a saying a long, long time ago about opportunity, that opportunity no longer knocks, right? Opportunity just stands around to see if you recognize it. And so we've got to make sure that when we are assessing whether something is an opportunity, we are looking at the full scope, right? Because opportunity can be intoxicating, right? Especially for people who have waited a long time to be seen. A door opens and the immediate assumption is, ooh, this must be God. But an open door is not always an assigned door. Some doors test your discernment. Hear me what I say. Not every open door is a door with your name on it, right? Some doors reveal your appetite and some expose your insecurities, and some offer visibility without alignment. Some provide income while quietly draining purpose, that you're distracted. Hear what I'm saying, right? Some appear connected to your destiny, but are actually connected to distraction. You hear what I'm saying? And some are genuine opportunities that still belong to another season. Let that sit down. Genuine opportunities that belong to another season. And so we have to learn how to ask the questions, right? Because the question is not only can I enter, the question is, should I enter now? What will this require? What will it interrupt? What must be neglected for me to be able to sustain this? Does this opportunity strengthen the house or force the entire house to reorganize around it? The question is, will it deepen the assignment or merely expand activity? Because a lot of people confuse busyness with productivity. And so we have to ask, does it align with my values and can I carry it without abandoning what God has already told me to steward? So I'm saying to you, opportunity should be examined for its weight, not merely admired for its appearance, because every door has a cost. You hear people say, oh, it's going to cost you. I promise you, it's going to cost you something. And wisdom determines whether that cost serves the assignment. Different seasons require different kinds of faithfulness. Now, faithfulness is still faithfulness, but there's dimensions to that, right? Because there are seasons of planting, and we know this because the Bible tells us this in Ecclesiastes, right? There's seasons for building and pruning, and seasons of healing, of learning, of visibility and preparation, and even seasons of multiplication, right? Seasons of rest, seasons of release, right? But what happens in all of that is that confusion increases when we attempt to perform the assignment of another season. Oh, where's my bell? Ring it right for you. I don't know if you can hear the bell, but I've been ringing my bell for, oh, good gracious, a good 10, 12 years now. When I'm teaching, I even carry it with me when I go. But what we have to understand is this: a planting season can feel unproductive if you are measuring it by harvest. A pruning season can feel like punishment if you do not understand preparation. A season of healing can slow you if you are comparing it with someone else's expansion. And most people get stuck when they start doing that. And we have to remember that a season of visibility can feel frightening if you have built your identity around hiding. A season of rest can feel irresponsible if your worth has been connected to constant output. And a season of execution can feel restrictive if you prefer the freedom of endless ideation. And so I will say to you, the question is not what is everyone else doing? That's none of your business. The question is, what has this season been authorized to produce in me? Woo! What has this season? I want you to just kind of pause right there because, I'm trying to hold it together here because that statement alone, what has this season been authorized to produce in me? You heard what I said. Sometimes people are operating out of season. And now we have to assess what season we are currently in and ask what has been authorized in this season to produce in me, right? So perhaps your room is the one that contains the lesson that you keep resisting because it does not resemble the outcome you expected. Notice I'm saying you expected. If you go back into some of the legacy rising conversations, I believe it was number 2, where I talked about why I built this house. And within this house is the great room. And it's the don't call it a comeback. Legacy requires evidence. Legacy Rising Weekend 2027. That is one complete title, one complete conference experience, one great room. And the great room is where women gather for concentrated revelation. I was trying to think of what else I was going to say. Activation, encounter, and commissioning. It's not simply a place to hear inspiring speakers. And we had our very first conference this year, and that was Come Out of the Shadows. And so the Legacy Rising, the don't call it a comeback Legacy Rising weekend, it is uniquely designed for women who know that something within them has been awakened and now requires intentional space and sacred community and honest examination and spiritual movement. And inside of that, we have the Sacred Sister facilitators who serve within that great room during the Saturday sessions. And the great room may be your first room if you recognize that you need more than information. You need interruption, right? A pattern interrupt. You need to be removed from your normal rhythm long enough to hear what daily noise has been drowning out. You need an environment where identity and faith and evidence and becoming and legacy are examined together. You need to gather with women who are also answering the call to rise. But the great room is not the entire house. It is a significant encounter within it. And the conference can ignite something powerful. What happens afterwards requires continued stewardship. Hmm. Legacy continuation is the offer beyond the Legacy Rising weekend. And it exists because transformation should not end when the conference ends, right? A powerful weekend can reveal truth, but revelation requires reinforcement. And an encounter can create momentum, but momentum requires structure. A declaration can be sincere, but evidence requires practice. And the continuation room may be where you begin if you experienced, inspiration before, but struggled to sustain it. You've attended events, you've taken lots and lots of notes, you made your commitments. Maybe you even ran around a room and you felt renewed. But then you return to the same environment, to the same habits, the same demands and distractions, and you watched the urgency slowly fade. Now, that doesn't mean the encounter was false. It just may mean communication and continuation was absent. And so the continuation room is for the person who does not merely want another moment. She wants a process, accountability, development, community, tracking, integration. And in other words, a pathway for returning or turning what was received into what is lived. Because the weekend may awaken the assignment. Continuation helps you to steward it. Hmm. The marketplace room is where leadership meets application, right? It includes corporate leadership, government, higher education, organizational development, consulting, executive coaching, training, and the leadership intensive. This room, it may be calling you if your present challenge involves leading people, building trust, communicating with absolute precision, or strengthening culture. and navigating conflict and difficult conversations and developing your team and stewarding authority, or even translating values into measurable organization behavior. You may be deeply gifted and still need leadership development. You may have influence and still need stronger systems. You may even care about people and still struggle to hold them accountable because that requires a level of transparency and vulnerability. You may be technically excellent and still need to understand the human experience of those you actually lead. And many times leaders leave that component off, the human centered leadership. You may have a title, but lack the tools required to carry it. And we see that, and we know this because 32%, I believe that number is 32% of the problems that managers and supervisors and leaders and directors, 32% of the problems that they have is due to lack of proper supervisory skills or leadership skills or management skills or whatever you want to call it. And so the marketplace room does not ask you to become less human in order to become more professional. It actually helps you become more skillful in the stewardship of people, the stewardship of responsibility, of communication, of culture and results. And this may be your first room if the quality of your leadership is now determining the quality of other people's experience. Because once people are entrusted to your influence, and I always say that, people that are leading people, the people that are now reporting to them or responsible to them, they're your gifts. And how you open that gift determines the culture, the environment, the team that you produce. And so we've got to consider, the fact that once people are entrusted to your influence, personal growth is no longer merely personal. Your development affects the entire environment. So we have to do the work. Another room in the house or the main house is the library. The library. I remember the first day that one of the people that I know when I was much younger, they made sure that I understood that there were two R's in after the B in library. But the library contains the leadership trilogy, and I think you can probably see it over my shoulder here. I had our leadership trilogy. It's Sugar and Salt Look the Same, Great Teams Don't Happen, and Legacy Rising. It also includes the companion workbook that I've written, right? Leadership frameworks, assessments and tools, keynote concepts, and teaching material that deepen the intellectual architecture of the house. And so the library may be your first room if you sense what is wrong, but do not yet have the language for it. Because what we're saying, what we are proclaiming about who we are, what we do, it all matters, right? Because what cannot be named is difficult to examine, and what can't be examined is difficult to change. So perhaps you understand that trust is missing, but you do not know how to rebuild it. Perhaps you even know the team is struggling, but you have not identified whether the issue is communication, whether it's accountability, role clarity. And that's definitely one that, some people overlook, because we do have a lot of people in positions that they took because someone told them that that would be a good place for them to work, to a good profession for them to get into. But now they're miserable and they're on a team where perhaps the supervisor, leader, manager, director, executive, or provost, or whatever their titles are not able to provide them the clarity that they need for how they fit, right? So the culture shifts, or even the leadership behavior. So perhaps your leadership must rise, but you need a framework that translates instinct into repeatable practice. And so, excuse me, the library is not passive. Books are not decorations, which is why I'm constantly getting new ones, but also understanding and writing them, right? Frameworks are not intellectual ornaments. Knowledge must be applied. And the library equips you to identify patterns, test your assumptions, evaluate your behaviors, and act with greater precision. It may be the first room for the person who is ready to replace vague frustration with informed action. Legacy Daughters is the mentoring room, right? This is the inheritance and formation space because it includes mentorship, discipleship, spiritual covering, identity development, wisdom transfer, leadership formation, and the multiplication of women who are being equipped to carry legacy responsibly. And so the mentoring room may be where you begin if your deepest question is, what should I do? But who am I becoming? Right? You may have access to information. You may be highly educated. You may attend events. You may even read books. But there are seasons when information cannot replace relationship. There are lessons that require proximity, right? And questions that need more than general answers and patterns that become visible when someone knows your story. And so, growth that requires both challenge and care, mentorship is not dependency. Healthy mentorship does not create replicas. It helps people recognize, develop, and steward what God placed in within them. And so the mentoring room becomes, and it may be calling you if you need someone who can see both your gift and your gaps, someone who does not flatter your potential while ignoring your formation, maybe even someone who can honor your individuality while helping you mature in identity and discernment and leadership and responsibility. Build the house is the blueprint room, right? And this room emerged from the very process that ended my own fragmentation, which is how we started this whole conversation at the beginning of July. It exists for the person carrying vision, ideas, roles, responsibilities, gifts, obligations, opportunities, and assignments, but lacking a governing structure strong enough to hold them together. And so the blueprint room may be it may be your first room if your life feels full but unorganized. Uh-oh. Right? Not merely cluttered, just ungoverned. Because you have notebooks, you have ideas, you have documents, projects, plans, responsibilities, possibilities, but no central. Let's just be clear, no central architecture. Okay? That determines what belongs where it belongs, right? What belongs, where it belongs, when it should be developed, how it connects, what must wait, what should be released, and what does not serve the assignment at all. And so, build the house is a trademark that I have. It's not another productivity system. It's designed to make you. It's not designed right to make you do more. It's a process for creating aligned order, right? Because it asks you some very specific things. It asks you to identify the formation, the seed and the foundation, the roots, the trunks, the branches, the rooms, right? The river, the fruit, and the fragrance of what you've been called to build. And so the blueprint room, it may be where you begin if you are tired of managing disconnected pieces and ready to establish a structure capable of carrying your life beyond the enthusiasm of a single moment. Hmm. You probably do, if we tell the truth about it, because most of us will need several rooms over the course of our lives. And the question is not whether more than one room applies. The question is which room has priority now? Because you may need the library and the marketplace room, but perhaps you need language before implementation. You may need the great room and the continuation room, but encounter may need to come before sustained accountability. You see where I'm going with that? You may need mentoring and build the house, but perhaps identity must be strengthened before architecture can be trusted. So the sequence and the order in which you go, it matters because the right resources in the wrong order can still create confusion. So do not ask only, which room apply to me or which rooms apply to me. You could ask which door leads to the work that makes the next doorway more fruitful. That, my friend, is discernment. Let me give you 4 questions to sit with. Number one, what is demanding honest attention? And I want to be clear about that because I'm not saying what is making the most noise. What is requiring truth? That's what I'm saying. Is there a conversation that you keep postponing, or maybe a pattern that you keep explaining, and even going further or deeper and asking a wound you keep working around, or a responsibility you keep spiritualizing instead of addressing it? Maybe there's a decision that you keep delaying because clarity may require change. Your room may be connected to the truth you are most tempted, watch this, to avoid. Question number 2, what is limiting the rest of the house? And you must ask, where's the bottleneck? Is the issue identity? Is it communications? Is it systems, capacity, healing, discipline, leadership skill? Could be financial stewardship, spiritual alignment. And so the first room is often the place where progress will release movement elsewhere. Question number 3, what fruit should this season produce? Right? What's authorized? Right? What is this season authorized to produce? And you have to actually ask yourself, do you need clarity? Do I need courage? How about completion or consistency and trust and healing and visibility and structure and evidence? The desired fruit may help identify the room equipped to cultivate it. Question number 4. What has God been repeatedly, over and over, time and time again and again, emphasizing? Right? Not the thing that you heard once during an emotional encounter, but what keeps returning, right? Through your prayer, through your scripture, even when you seek wise counsel or patterns of behaviors and actions that you take, or the conviction that you're feeling, and even in the opportunities that you're pursuing or the ones that have closed doors. You might be experiencing persistent unrest or unexpected confirmation, because God may already be directing you toward a room you have not wanted to enter. And you may not have wanted to enter because it requires something that most people are afraid to do. And that is realize that we must surrender before we receive the reward. Ooh. I was just thinking about a passage that I included in um, my book. I'll tell you all about that another time. Hmm. Resistance. We are good at resistance. Most people are. But resistance is not always a sign that something is wrong. All right. So I kind of set you up right there. All right. Sometimes resistance reveals the significance of a thing. Right? Think about that, because you may resist mentoring because receiving guidance makes you feel vulnerable. You may resist the marketplace room because measurable accountability exposes gaps that natural charisma concealed. You may even resist a library because learning requires you to admit that instinct is not enough. You may resist the great room because visibility threatens the identity you built in the shadows. And you may resist legacy continuation because sustained transformation, it requires more than emotional agreement. You may even resist build the house because order will force you to decide which idea belongs and which ones must be released. And so the room you resist may hold the very discipline required for your next level of freedom. But take note of what I'm about to say. Resistance should be examined, not blindly overridden. Okay. So ask yourself, Am I resisting because this is misaligned or because this is unfamiliar? Ask yourself, am I sensing caution or avoiding accountability? Ask, is this discernment or fear attempting to preserve the current version of me, the part that I want to hold on to, but I'm really being required to let go? And so wisdom does not shame resistance, it interprets it. Chew on that for a moment. A room is a starting point, not a prison. A word of caution here: do not turn your first room into another restrictive identity. Okay. Because you are not only a leader, not only a mentee, not only an author, only a conference attendee, only a person building system. The room serves your development. It does not define the totality of who you are. And you may begin in the library and later into the marketplace room. You may enter through the great room and then continue through legacy continuation. You may begin with mentoring and discovering the confidence to build publicly. You may even begin with build the house and finally create the structure that allows every other assignment to breathe. So movement through the house is natural, and the rooms are connected. Growth is one area where will reveal needs in another. But healthy movement is guided by readiness, not restlessness. So do not abandon the room because the work became difficult. Do not remain in the room after its present assignment has been completed. You have to be willing to discern when to stay, discern when to move, discern when to return with greater maturity. There's one more possibility. Perhaps you've walked through every visible room and still sense that something is missing. Now, that does not always mean the house has failed you. It may simply mean you are carrying the blueprint for a room that has not yet been built. And some people are called to enter established rooms while others are called to extend the architecture. And so perhaps you have language for a need to no current program actually addresses. Perhaps your life experience has prepared you to serve people others actually overlooked. And perhaps you see a connection between fields that have remained unnecessarily divided. Perhaps your frustration, the frustration you feel is not merely dissatisfaction, it just may be a design pressure. But before you begin construction, this is something that you must really do. You must ask, is this room truly needed? Who is it designed to serve? What problem does it solve? How does it connect to the rest of the house? And what foundation will support it? What will it require to steward it? Does it carry the fragrance? Because innovation without governance creates another fragment. And we talked about fragmentation from the very beginning. The time is up for that. Because new rooms must strengthen the house, not compete with it. Some people delay movement because their first step feels insignificant compared with the magnitude of the vision. Oof, I've been there, right? They believe finding the room means having a complete plan, and it does not. Because your first step may be reading one chapter or making one appointment or having the honest conversation, or maybe even submitting one proposal and establishing one boundary, attending one gathering and asking one question. It may even be creating one folder or finishing one document, recording one message, right? Or even resting for the day without guilt or admitting that the strategy you have been defending is no longer working. Small steps are not evidence of a small assignment. And I want you to allow that to resonate with you because they are evidence that you understand how construction begins. A house is not built by attempting to raise every wall at the same time. It doesn't happen that way. It is built through ordered progression. One decision creates the condition for another. One act of obedience clarifies the next. One room becomes functional and the house gains capacity. So you do not need the entire journey illuminated. You need enough light for the next faithful step. So let me ask you, what has your life been trying to tell you? Which needs keep returning time after time, regardless of how busy you actually become or even think that you are? What are you attempting to solve with activity that may require truth? And which room appeals to your image? Which room addresses your actual need? What season are you in? What fruit should this season produce? And what are you resisting and why? Consider your assessment and ask, where's the bottleneck limiting the rest of your life? And what has God been repeatedly emphasizing? What would become possible if you gave one area of your life undivided attention? What are you afraid will be neglected if you choose one beginning? And can you trust the sequencing is not abandonment? And perhaps most importantly, you are searching for the right room, or are you waiting for a room that requires nothing from you? I'm just going to look this way, right? Because the truth of the matter is this: every room produces transformation, okay? Every room produces transformation, and it will ask something of you. It's going to ask for your honesty, for your time, for your humility, for your investment, for your discipline, for your courage, your consistency, your release, which is one of the hardest things for people to do, but it's also going to ask for your responsibility. Because the doorway may be open, but you still have to decide whether you are ready to cross the threshold. And if you don't make that decision to cross the threshold, then you're going to remain exactly where you are, which is the definition of insanity. Expecting and continuing to do the same thing, expecting a different outcome. It's just like giving someone else poison, or taking poison and expecting someone else to die. It doesn't work that way. Take the step. So let's bring this into scope. What exactly have I been saying when I talk about finding your room? I invited you to come into the house. I invited you to come in to sit down, to give thought, to journal, to pray, to consider. And now I'm asking you to find your room, because finding your room is not about assigning yourself another label. It's about identifying the environment, the relationship, the resource, the discipline, or the experience most aligned with the work of your present season. I said the living room helps you to orient. The great room creates concentrated encounter and activation. Legacy continuation sustains what the encounter awakens. The marketplace strengthens leadership and practice. The library provides language, frameworks, and tools. The mentoring room supports formation and inheritance. The blueprint room creates governing order for the vision you carry. Every room serves a distinct purpose, and none exists to compete with the other, and none requires you to deny the fullness of who you are in order to enter. You may need several rooms eventually, but you do not need to begin everywhere. You need to begin honestly. You need to begin intentionally. You need to begin where alignment can produce the greatest movement. And perhaps your first room is not the room you expected. Perhaps it's the one you have been circling, the one whose doorway keeps appearing in your conversations, in your dreams, the one connected to the question you cannot silence. Maybe it's the one that requires a version of courage you have not yet practiced, the one where the next layer of your becoming is waiting. And I'm going to say to you, do not enter because everyone else is there. Do not avoid it because no one else understands. Do not rush because you feel behind, and do not delay because the room requires change. I'm inviting you to stand in the living room and stand in the living room long enough to hear clearly, then move, not from pressure, from alignment, not to prove something, but to steward something, not because every question has been answered, because the next answer is waiting on the other side of your obedience. And perhaps that is why you found your way here. Maybe you were not looking for an entire house. Maybe you were simply looking for a place where one part of your life could finally make sense. But now that you're here, perhaps you can see that your need was never isolated. It was connected to your leadership touches, your identity, and your identity touches your faith, and your faith touches your discernment, and your discernment touches your decisions, and your decisions shape your evidence. And your evidence becomes part of your legacy. The rooms are distinct, but the life moving through them is one, your life. And whatever you began and wherever you begin, you are still welcome here. Thank you for the gift of your time and the opportunity to serve you with excellence. Thank you for investing this time with me. Thank you for trusting me with your attention. And thank you for walking with me through this first month of Legacy Rising Conversations. But I want to admonish you, do not rush to choose a room simply because this conversation is ending. Take the question with you, pray about it, journal about it, and pay attention to what continues to surface. And then take one faithful step. You can learn more about me, about my books, my leadership work, my speaking, training, the full Don't Call It a Comeback Legacy Requires Evidence Legacy Rising Weekend 2027 experience, the full Legacy Rising Enterprise, and the other rooms within the house at dretheljames.com. And next week, we begin a new movement in our Legacy Rising conversations. But before we do, I want you to leave this room with one question. What room do you need first? Not forever, not for everyone else, for this season, for this assignment, for the person you are becoming now. Until then, my name is Dr. Ethel James, as I stated, strategically known as Dr. J. The living room is always open. Come in, sit down, let's talk, and I'll see you next Wednesday. God bless.